Rome's origins are wrapped in legend, a blend of myth and memory that the Romans themselves cherished. The most famous tale begins with the twins Romulus and Remus, sons of Mars, god of war. Abandoned as infants on the banks of the Tiber River, they were famously suckled by a she-wolf and later raised by a shepherd. When grown, they set out to found a city, but in a fateful quarrel, Romulus slew his brother and became the sole founder, giving his name to the newborn settlement, Rome, traditionally dated to 753 BCE. From these mythical beginnings, Rome grew under the rule of kings. The early monarchs were not despots in the modern sense, but leaders who combined religious, military, and judicial authority. Romulus himself supposedly created the first Senate and divided the population into clans, laying the groundwork for Rome's rigid social order. Successive kings expanded the city's institutions, built temples, and strengthened its defenses. Numa Pompilius, for example, was credited with establishing Rome's religious traditions, while Servius Tullius reformed the army and organized society into classes based on wealth. Yet Rome was never isolated. From the start, it stood at a crossroads of Latin, Sabine, and especially Etruscan influence. The Etruscan kings, who eventually dominated Rome, introduced monumental architecture, gladiatorial games, and a taste for engineering. Under them, Rome began to resemble not a village, but a true city. The monarchy ended violently. The last king, Tarquinius Superbus, the Proud, was notorious for his tyranny. His son's assault on the noblewoman Lucretia sparked a rebellion that toppled the monarchy in 509 BCE. In its place arose a new form of government, the Roman Republic, one that rejected kingship forever, but kept the ambition, discipline, and hunger for power that would drive Rome for centuries. With the expulsion of King Tarquinius Superbus in 509 BCE, Rome reinvented itself. No longer ruled by monarchs, it became a republic, a state where power was shared among elected officials and kingship was banished forever. At its heart stood the Senate, dominated by aristocratic families known as patricians, who claimed the right to guide the destiny of the city. Ordinary citizens, the plebeians, had little say at first, but Rome's political system would evolve through constant struggle between these two groups. This conflict of the orders shaped the republic's character. Plebeians fought for, and gradually won, representation, most notably through the office of the tribune of the plebs, officials empowered to veto unfair laws. Over centuries, Rome forged a system of checks and balances, not perfect, but remarkably resilient. It gave citizens a sense of shared identity. They were not subjects of a king, but members of a commonwealth. Meanwhile, Rome turned outward. First came the wars to dominate the Italian peninsula, against Latin neighbors, the mountain-dwelling Samnites, and the Greek colonies in the south. By the early 3rd century BCE, all of Italy bowed to Rome. Next came the Punic Wars against Carthage, Rome's greatest rival. These epic struggles saw Hannibal march elephants across the Alps to terrorize Italy, but Rome's endurance proved greater. By 146 BCE, Carthage was destroyed, its lands annexed, and Rome stood as master of the western Mediterranean. Success bred ambition. Rome extended its reach into Greece, Asia Minor, and beyond. Provinces poured wealth and slaves into the city, but prosperity brought deep inequality. Small farmers were displaced, aristocrats grew rich, and restless masses filled the streets of Rome. Reformers like the Gracchi brothers sought to redistribute land but met violent deaths. Generals like Marius, Sulla, and Pompey turned their armies into instruments of personal power. The Republic's principles cracked under the weight of greed, factionalism, and ambition. The rise of Julius Caesar marked the climax. After conquering Gaul, he defied the Senate by crossing the Rubicon in 49 BCE, igniting civil war. Victorious, he declared himself dictator for life, only to be assassinated in 44 BCE by senators who claimed to defend liberty. Yet the republic they fought to save was already dying, and from its ashes, a new kind of rule would be born. The death of Julius Caesar left Rome adrift in chaos, but out of the turmoil emerged his adopted heir, Octavian. Shrewd, patient, and calculating, Octavian defeated his rivals, including the charismatic Mark Antony and Queen Cleopatra of Egypt, and in 27 BCE, he became the unchallenged master of Rome. Yet he avoided Caesar's fatal mistake. Instead of calling himself king or dictator, he took the modest title princeps, or first citizen. History remembers him as Augustus, the first Roman emperor. Under Augustus, Rome entered a golden age. The Republic's old forms, Senate, magistrates, assemblies, were preserved in appearance, but real power lay with the emperor, who commanded the armies and controlled the provinces. Augustus restored order, secured Rome's frontiers, and filled the city with monuments proclaiming Rome's destiny as ruler of the world. "I found Rome a city of brick," he boasted, "and left it a city of marble." This stability ushered in the Pax Romana, 2 centuries of relative peace and prosperity. Roads and aqueducts stitched the empire together from Britain to Egypt, Spain to Syria. Trade flourished, carrying grain, wine, spices, and silk across vast distances. Roman law spread, binding diverse peoples under common rules, while Latin and Greek culture blended into a shared civilization. But peace depended on strong rulers, and Rome's emperors were a mixed lot. After Augustus came Tiberius, then the notorious Caligula and Nero, remembered for cruelty and excess. Yet others, like Vespasian and Trajan, were capable leaders who expanded Rome's power. The 2nd century brought the so-called 5 good emperors, Nerva, Trajan, Hadrian, Antoninus Pius, and Marcus Aurelius, under whom the empire reached its height. Trajan's conquests pushed Rome's borders to their greatest extent, while Hadrian built fortifications, including the famous wall in Britain. Still, cracks were visible. Behind the grandeur lay growing pressures, economic strain, restless frontiers, and the challenge of succession. When Marcus Aurelius died in 180 CE, leaving the throne to his reckless son Commodus, the long peace began to unravel. Rome had reached its peak, but the centuries ahead would test whether even the greatest empire could withstand time. With the death of Marcus Aurelius in 180 CE, the golden age of the Pax Romana ended. His son Commodus inherited the throne, but unlike his father, he had little of the philosopher's wisdom. Arrogant and unstable, Commodus fancied himself a gladiator, striding into the arena to fight for spectacle while neglecting the empire's governance. His assassination in 192 CE set off a brutal chain reaction. Generals, senators, and usurpers clawed for power, plunging Rome into turmoil. The 3rd century became an age of chaos. Between 235 and 284 CE, more than 20 emperors rose and fell, most meeting violent ends. Power passed not through dynasties, but through the sword. Whichever general could secure the loyalty of the legions was hailed emperor, until the next rival struck him down. This revolving door of rulers weakened the state and shattered stability. Meanwhile, Rome's enemies sensed weakness. The Germanic tribes raided across the Rhine and Danube. In the east, a resurgent Persian empire struck deep into Roman lands, even capturing an emperor, Valerian, in 260 CE, a humiliation unthinkable in Rome's proud past. Rebellions broke out within the empire itself. The provinces of Gaul and Palmyra split away, forming breakaway states that challenged Rome's authority. As wars raged, the economy collapsed. Constant fighting drained the treasury, and emperors debased the currency, sparking runaway inflation. Trade declined, cities shrank, and plague swept through the empire, further hollowing its strength. Once mighty Rome, the master of the Mediterranean, seemed on the brink of disintegration. Yet even in this age of despair, there were flashes of resilience. Leaders like Aurelian fought to reunify the fractured empire, defeating separatist states and earning the title Restitutor Orbis, restorer of the world. But the deeper cracks remained, and Rome's survival demanded more than victories on the battlefield. It required fundamental change. That change came with Diocletian, a soldier emperor who rose from humble origins in 284 CE. Ruthless but pragmatic, he realized that Rome could no longer be ruled as it once had been. To save the empire, he would reshape it entirely, and in doing so, lay the foundation for a very different Rome. By the late 3rd century, Rome was staggering, bled by endless wars, economic collapse, and civil strife. Into this storm stepped Diocletian in 284 CE, a soldier of humble origin who seized power and refused to be yet another short-lived emperor. Unlike his doomed predecessors, Diocletian understood that Rome's crisis was structural. The empire was too vast, too vulnerable, and too complex for a single man to govern. His answer was radical. Divide the burden. He created the tetrarchy, Rule of 4. 2 senior emperors, called Augusti, and 2 juniors, called Caesars, shared authority, each ruling a different region of the empire. The system promised stability, with orderly succession and local rulers closer to the frontiers. Diocletian also reorganized the army, fortified borders, and imposed strict economic controls to combat inflation. Harsh but effective, his measures gave Rome breathing room. Yet even Diocletian could not halt the empire's transformation. In 305 CE, he did what no Roman emperor had done before. He abdicated voluntarily, retiring to his palace in Dalmatia. Power soon fell into the hands of another towering figure, Constantine the Great. Ruthless in battle, Constantine reunited the empire after years of civil war, defeating rival emperors one by one. But his legacy was not only military. In 313 CE, with the Edict of Milan, he legalized Christianity, ending centuries of persecution. For Rome, once defined by its pagan gods and ancestral rituals, this was nothing less than a revolution. The new faith spread quickly, binding diverse peoples together under a shared creed. Constantine also looked eastward for Rome's future. In 330 CE, he founded Constantinople on the site of ancient Byzantium, a glittering new capital strategically placed between Europe and Asia. Rich in trade and easily defended, the city would endure long after Rome itself had fallen. By Constantine's death in 337 CE, the empire was transformed. No longer the pagan republic of old, it was now a Christian monarchy centered on 2 great capitals. Rome had been saved from collapse, but at a cost. It was no longer the Rome of Augustus or Caesar. It was something new, a world straddling antiquity and the Middle Ages. After Constantine's death in 337 CE, the empire was left to his sons, who divided it among themselves and soon plunged into fratricidal wars. From then on, Rome was rarely whole. The empire increasingly split between East and West, the wealthier Greek-speaking East, anchored by Constantinople, and the Latin-speaking West, centered on Rome, Ravenna, and Milan. This division would prove fateful. The Eastern Empire had money, strong trade networks, and defensible frontiers. The Western Empire, by contrast, was plagued by weak leadership, economic decline, and an ever-thinning army stretched across vast frontiers. Worse still, pressure from migrating and invading peoples mounted with each decade. The Huns, fierce horsemen from the steppes, pushed Germanic tribes into Roman lands. Seeking safety, the Visigoths crossed the Danube in 376 CE, only to be mistreated by Roman officials. Their resentment exploded into war, and in 378 CE they crushed the Roman army at Adrianople, killing the Emperor Valens. It was a shattering blow. Never again would Rome dominate the battlefield with the confidence of old. In 410 CE, the unthinkable happened. Rome itself was sacked by the Visigoth king Alaric. Though the empire endured, the psychological wound was deep. Decades later, in 455 CE, the Vandals repeated the humiliation, plundering the Eternal City from the sea. By now, emperors in the West were little more than puppets, controlled by powerful generals or barbarian warlords who carved out kingdoms from Roman soil. Meanwhile, the East watched, sometimes aiding, sometimes ignoring, as the West withered. The final act came in 476 CE, when the Germanic chieftain Odoacer deposed the boy emperor Romulus Augustulus. No armies marched to restore him, no senate rallied in defiance. The Western Roman Empire, once the master of the known world, simply ceased to exist. Yet this was not the end of Rome's story. In Constantinople, the Eastern Empire, what we now call the Byzantine Empire, lived on for nearly 1,000 years. But in the West, the fall of Rome marked the dawn of something new, the fragmented, war-torn world of the Middle Ages. Though the Western Empire crumbled in 476 CE, Rome's story did not end. In the East, Constantinople, founded by Constantine on the shores of the Bosporus, rose as the new heart of Roman power. What we call the Byzantine Empire was, to its people, still simply the Roman Empire. Its emperors bore Roman titles, its laws descended from Roman tradition, and its culture blended Roman governance with Greek intellect and Christian faith. The Byzantines endured where the West had failed. Wealth from trade across the Mediterranean and Silk Road filled their coffers, while massive walls and a powerful navy shielded Constantinople from countless sieges. Under Justinian the Froward in the 6th century, the empire reached for Rome's old glory. His generals reconquered parts of Italy, North Africa, and Spain, while his scholars compiled the Corpus Juris Civilis, the great codification of Roman law that still influences legal systems today. The empire's glittering churches, like the Hagia Sophia, stood as monuments to both faith and imperial power. But Byzantium faced relentless challenges. Waves of Persians, Arabs, Bulgars, Crusaders, and Turks tested its resilience. The empire shrank, rebounded, and shrank again, a candle flickering against the winds of history. Its culture, however, remained luminous, preserving Greek philosophy, Roman law, and Christian theology, passing them on to the emerging medieval world. The final blow came in 1453, when Mehmed II of the Ottoman Turks breached Constantinople's mighty walls with cannon fire. After nearly 100 years, the Eastern Roman Empire fell. With it, the last living remnant of the ancient Roman state was extinguished. Yet Rome never truly died. Its language, Latin, became the root of Europe's tongues. Its legal codes shaped nations. Its architecture inspired cathedrals and capitals. Its idea of a republic influenced modern democracy. Even Christianity, once persecuted in Rome, spread to become a world faith. Rome's empire has vanished, but Rome itself endures, in law, language, architecture, and imagination. As the poet Horace once wrote, "You may crush Rome, but she rises ever anew." The eternal city never truly falls. From a shepherd's hut on the banks of the Tiber to the glittering domes of Constantinople, Rome's journey stretched across more than 12 centuries. It began in myth, with Romulus and Remus, and grew into the most formidable empire the world had yet seen. Rome rose by discipline, ambition, and an unshakable belief in its destiny. It conquered with the sword, governed with law, and unified diverse peoples under its banner. The Republic forged resilience through struggle between patrician and plebeian, while the empire forged order from chaos under Augustus and his successors. The Pax Romana gave the Mediterranean 2 centuries of prosperity, a foundation on which Western civilization would stand. Yet Rome also revealed the dangers of power without balance: corruption, civil war, and overreach. Its collapse was not a single moment but a slow unraveling, hastened by enemies at the gates and divisions within. Still, Rome's spirit refused to vanish. In Byzantium, emperors called themselves Romans long after the West had fallen. In the medieval kingdoms that rose from its ruins, kings and popes claimed the mantle of Roman authority. And in the modern world, Rome's legacy pulses everywhere. In the arches of our cities, in the words we speak, in the codes of law that govern our courts, and in the very concept of republican government, Rome was never only a city or an empire. It was and remains an idea, the idea that human ambition can build something vast, ordered, and enduring. Every civilization that followed has measured itself against Rome's shadow, whether to imitate, surpass, or avoid its fate. The eternal city may no longer rule the world, but in 1,000 unseen ways it still shapes it. Rome fell, yet Rome endures.